Football at 4. He spoke about Devontae Smith. Well, we'll see. We now have an answer. We'll get that to you in just a second. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Adam Kaplan from the Inside the Birds podcast is here. And I guess we could say we have a little bit of breaking news. You heard Nick Sirianni today. He said we'll see. We now have an answer on Devontae Smith.
Yeah, Mike, he is out. That's what we were expecting. This is 3 weeks he's had this injury. Mike, we've done these segments for 6, 7 years. When players don't practice for the week at all, they just don't play. I mean, it's rare. Veteran players get the deference. Like sometimes, if it's a player who they know could handle not playing or doesn't have an injury that they've had for many weeks, sometimes they'll let the player go. But they weren't going to take a chance here. So we kind of had a feeling this is going to happen. Jahan Dotson will start for him. And they'll have to get through the receiver position. They're not very deep at it. Johnny Wilson, who we call the blocking receiver, will have to get some more snaps. They can look at the practice squad, but this has been decided. And then, by the way, Bryce Huff went on IR today after his surgery yesterday for his wrist. So that's done. We're hoping to see Jalen Hunt a little bit more. 2 weeks ago, he played a ton of snaps. Last week, none on defense, but we expect him to be in the rotation this week.
Yeah, you just mentioned Dotson. What do you think Covey goes into the slot here then?
Well, here's the thing. They have to activate him for the game. He has started practicing this week. See, Mike, he's been out for so long, nearly 2 months. The question is, it's not about health. The shoulder, as I understand it, the fracture is recovered. It's healed. It's just a matter of how's his conditioning. If they think his conditioning is good, they'll activate him by the deadline tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. If not, they'll keep him going another week. And he did really well in the slot. And boy, it sure sounds like, by the way, that Covey will take over as punt returner. That's not decided yet, but once he's back, the way Nick Sirianni, sometimes you could see the hints, Mike.
Yeah.
That, to me, would be the hint that Covey will take that over, but again, they haven't fully decided that yet.
All right, so Smith out at wide receiver. Covey will wait to see if he gets activated for the game. Bryce Huff, you mentioned he will miss an extended time. What's the deal there? How do they – I don't know. I mean, people look at Huff and don't think he made much of an impact, but how do they kind of fill those snaps? There's not many to fill.
Well, he didn't make an impact at all because clearly 17 million years they want production for that, and they didn't get it. Now, he wasn't terrible, but he became a part-time player. So Jalen Hunt now moves into the rotation. You really can't play Brandon Graham more than they have. We know Josh Sweat is a terrific player based on the way he's played him, and he has been – Mike, he very quietly has had what we would call bounce-back season. Now, is Josh Sweat the player he once was? That's debatable, but he's really bounced back after a very disappointing year last year. Mike, let's kind of call it like it is. It was disappointing. He really regressed, and he's bounced back in a big way. I mean, he got himself together. Now, the only guy they could really go to on the practice squad is Teron Jackson. As Mike has been on and off the Eagles roster for a number of years, who was a draft pick back in 2020. So really right now you're looking at Nolan Smith now, who's playing. It was playing more than Huff anyway. Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, Jalen Hunt, Brandon Graham, Milton Williams. Our Andrew DeCecco says it's more of a heel injury, not a foot. Williams is expected to play, so it's just a matter of do they want to go with four-man fronts? Do they want to go with how they want to do this? We'll have to see against the Rams on Sunday night. But the bottom line is those are the guys that they have. And this is a thing on their practice squad, Mike. They just don't have that. They signed O'Shawn Mathis, who's a former Rams draftee, who I can't imagine he'd play in this game. He just signed with the Eagles. He had only one practice, which is today's, which is short, and they'll have the walkthrough before they fly tomorrow afternoon to L.A. But the bottom line is, Mike, they're a little bit thin now at edge rush. That's something they're going to have to take a look at.
All right, Adam Kaplan, let's take a look at some of the key matchups in this game. The challenge from the Rams offense, obviously Nacua, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, yep. The fact that Matthew Stafford, he is a savvy veteran quarterback who still has some heat on the fastball. Kyren Williams. This is a pretty interesting offense. They were banged up, but they're 4-1 since they've gotten healthy.
Yeah, the Rams definitely present something from Williams in the run and pass game. Williams is a good screen runner. last week, Austin Eckler got them badly. Like he got the Eagles linebackers. We showed this on the Inside the Tape show where they caught Zach Bond flat-footed. He was late on a play, and they gave a big play to Eckler. So that's something, obviously, that the Rams will try to exploit. If you don't get pressure on Matthew Stafford, he could tear you apart. Now, the Dolphins got pressure on Stafford 2 weeks ago, and he shut them down. The Rams at home only scored 15 points. The Eagles, as we know, are a low blitz team. Below 20% last week. They played a coverage-based defense, which is actually what we were expecting against a young quarterback. And it worked. Now, I would say you'll just mix up their coverages against Stafford. We know we've seen everything, but the true Fangio defense, with Stafford talked about this week with their media in L.A., like he's gone against it before. You don't blitz. You play coverage. The Eagles, Mike, they didn't have the coverage players last year, but they have it this year. And by the way, the game that they played in Week 5 last year, I think it was October 8th, Stafford had a really good first half. They shut him down the second half. And things are way better, Mike. The discipline of this defense is way better. You mentioned Nacua and obviously Cooper Kupp, and there are Levy Heaven personnel. The Eagles can match up against them pretty well. Cooper DeJean becomes a major factor now as that slot defender. That's where you can really help them. They don't do anything with their tight end, so you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a tough team to read because of the before and after the injuries. But it's obvious when they're healthy, they have a pretty dynamic offense there. Do the L.A. Rams? Let's go to the defense. They've got some interesting challenges. Verse up front, they get to the quarterback. They've got some sacks. They're susceptible to the big play, though. They've given up 18 passing touchdowns. Perspective: the Eagles at this point last year had given up 21. So you saw how bad they're in the same, right around the same touchdown number.
Yeah, we moved to the switch sides, though. Yeah, to me, the Eagles. Now, one thing, Mike, with the Rams defense and the Eagles offense, I think what you have here is you've got the Hurts factor on the run, and that game last year, Mike, this is crazy. Hurts touched the ball 54 times, 15 rushes, a bunch of passes. He got sacked once. He was a major factor in the game. Actually, he dinged up his knee there in L.A. at SoFi last year last October. But to me, this is a very young Ram. Mentioned some of their young defenders. Byron, he's number 0, a really good player, a little bit older for a second-year player out of Tennessee. He's really talented. Jared Verse in the running for rookie defensive player of the year. They've got a very good rotation. Brandon Fisk, number 55. I know the Eagles have an elite offensive line, but Chris Shula, it's interesting. Chris Shula is their defensive coordinator. He actually went to college with Sean McVay at Miami, Ohio. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? College teammates now are calling offenses and defenses, so they're not very good at corner. Now I know the Eagles aren't going to have Devontae Smith, but you still got to spread them out. The Eagles played a lot of 12 personnel last week, a lot of 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. They'll probably do that this week, but you could still spread them out, get Grant Calcaterra on the field, who more or less, Mike, is a slot receiver when they use him. So I expect the Eagles to spread them out a little bit. I'd like to see that see Saquon Barkley in the pass game a little bit, like we saw last week. That the middle play, that play down the middle, which was huge. They just don't have a lot of experience, Mike, on defense, and that to me is where the Eagles could take advantage of, particularly in their front seven.
Yeah, when you look at Philadelphia's offensive line, they do rush the passer. They have the best pass rushing percentage in football. They get to the quarterback 43% of the time. But you think anytime that pass rush is a team strength, you hope the Eagles' offensive line kind of is the kryptonite there.
Yeah, and I don't really worry about that. Look, they're very young. They've got some versatility. But the Eagles, I don't see them struggling here. It's just they're a bunch of speed rushers. And this kid, Kobe Turner, who's phenomenal, defensive tackle, he is really good. You're going to see him up front. They've got Kobe Durant in the second. It's funny, they've got 2 Kobes, but they spell it differently. This is a young defense, Mike. A young defensive coordinator, 30 years old, Chris Shula, calling the plays for the first time in his career. So there are a lot of advantages for the Eagles here. I'm a little bit concerned with Devontae Smith being out. Mm-hmm. Their depth is going to be tested, the Eagles at receiver. They just don't have much. This is something, if there's one issue right now for the Eagles have, Mike, it's depth at the edge on defense and depth at receiver. We knew it was not good to begin with. We know they don't use a lot of 11 personnel. That's not the point. The point is when somebody gets hurt, we've seen how bad the Eagles do without A.J. Brown. Most when he's not played, they've been awful. Now they got away with it against New Orleans because of a couple big plays, but that's one thing to keep an eye on as we go forward, the depth at receiver. Now, by the way, once they make a decision with Covey, he'll be in the rotation at slot. Then that's something they've missed, is that slot receiver.
Big time. And as I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, like whether or not Smith was going to play, is that the difference in no, it wasn't Smith, it was T. Higgins for Cincinnati, but
yes.
Is that the difference in the outcome of this game possibly?
No, because I think there, Mike, the thing with the Bengals game was, yes, the Bengals, of course, came out like gangbusters and the Eagles shut them down. I'm not worried too much about Devontae because of Goddard. The Goddard, by the way, led them. He had 118 yards last year. He had a huge game against the Rams zone defense. A.J. Brown and Goddard dominated the pass game for the Eagles. And Hurts, by the way, had over 300 yards, and he had 15 carries in that game. Now, I don't think the ankle is going to be a problem for Hurts. I mean, he looked fine last week, but he's had this for a couple weeks. It's a minor ankle injury. We'll keep an eye on that, though, Mike. We'll have to keep an eye on that during the game.
All right, Rams and Eagles. We were talking about this right before you came on. Eagles playing to stay in play for the number 1 seed, obviously, and the division. And the Rams are playing for their division. Now, most people would say they have more desperation here. So who is this a bigger game for? Philly trying to stay pace with Detroit or the Rams trying to stay pace with the Cardinals?
Oh, certainly the Rams. First of all, the only way the Rams are getting in is if they get a wild card. I mean, look, can they win the division? Let's not forget about the Niners. The Niners, I can't believe they're 5-5. The Niners are banged up. I'm concerned about Brock. The Rams, Mike, are sort of like they seem to overachieve significantly each year. I just don't see. I don't see them winning that division. I know it's up for grabs. I got to think the Niners. We'll talk more about this going forward, but I can't. It's hard to understand why they keep underachieving. I know the Niners are banged up. They've had a number of players on offense being out. Mike, there have been 4 or 5 teams that have shocked me for good or bad reasons. I never thought the Cardinals could be a good team, but they certainly are.
Yeah, they're in this thing still. That division plays against each other a whole heck of a lot down the stretch. Before we let you run, thoughts on Daniel Jones getting released today?
Well, he asked for his release, and it's been a disaster. They're obviously in the quarterback race. We'll see this next year. Mike, it's not the earlier word I got from scouts around the league. It's not a great class. Now, we have to see who declares and so forth, who does well in testing and everything, but it does not appear to be a great class. Now, you got to wait 3 years to see how these quarterbacks do, but the Giants are a reboot. It's not just the quarterback. They've got a lot of issues on offense and defense.
Adam Kaplan, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, check out Inside the Birds pregame show and their postgame wrap-ups at Inside the Birds. You can check out the podcast on all podcasting platforms and on their YouTube channel. Adam, take care, bud.
Thank you.
All right, Adam Kaplan with the injury updates and the news you need.